Hey guys, welcome to another video on politics, trying to make politics easier for the common man to understand. And today we're gonna be looking at Trump's basically the executive orders that he has signed. If you do not know, it has been about a day or less than a day. And during his first day in office, basically the moment literally after his inauguration, he was basically at the venue signing a bunch of executive orders. And we're gonna be discussing all about these executive orders. I'm gonna be going into brief detail about each one of these executive orders. As you can see, here's a video mentioning all of the different executive orders. 78 Biden era EOs and I've already watched the whole thing, and you can watch if you want to. But let me just and run down some of the points, some of the executive orders that he has signed. And the first one, we are starting with the rescission of 78 of Biden's executive orders. As you all know, presidents have the ability to sign executive orders, and even Biden. And during his term, Biden signed a lot of executive orders, and this is talking about the rescission of basically a lot of these orders. Basically, Trump is planning to reverse a lot of these uh, executive orders, and it ranges from a bunch of things you can see in this web. There are many orders here. But the rundown. I mean, you can read it if you want, but the rundown is from stuff like racial equity, supporting basically just racial things. Also about gender, basically talking about his stance more reversing the orders such as providing extra support to black community or providing extra privileges to black communities or something like gender identity being able to identify as this or that and how this relates to the government, stuff like this. And it also talks a bit about, or some of the orders he reversed were also on climate change, as you can see, tackling climate change at home. Basically, a lot of the executive orders uh, plan to basically reduce climate change or to build more green things and stuff like that. Diverse, equity, inclusion. This one is a very talked about point by the Republicans. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is basically just saying you can get whatever job you want, or you can get better privileges by being in certain groups. That one will also be reversed, and a bunch of stuff. As you can see, lesbian and gay, bisexual, trans, queer, and intersex individuals, and a lot more. So basically, his first one, the rescission of 78 Biden orders, is basically just getting rid of his basically the policies that Trump doesn't agree with, right? The second and the third point that he did mention, and I'll bring up these two because they're about roughly about the same thing. Second and the third one are the freeze on bureaucrats imposing regulations, and as well as the freeze on government hiring expert. Basically a freeze on the government's and the federal hiring, except for the military and other categories, until the full control of the government, until Trump basically enters office. And basically, this is Trump basically saying, well, we need to stop we need to stop the government from imposing new laws, imposing all these different uh, laws without without my consent, or basically without my watch, because as you all know, Trump is only just being inaugurated. Trump needs to settle down first, so he's basically arguing no new policies, no governments will be hiring, or the bureaucrats cannot impose new policies while I am still in this process of getting into the swing of things, basically just getting settled down. And once Trump finally takes office, gets settled down, and has control of the government, and then stuff like government hiring and bureaucrats and then all these policy making will finally come into play. That's basically the gist of it. The fourth one we have is requiring governments to go back to full time work in the office, and basically him basically saying, there's a bunch of, the government needs to go back to work because we're gonna sign some policies. We're gonna be getting the work done, and we're gonna need some workers at the offices to facilitate all of this work. So it's just a very minor point you did. Number five, and this one I think is a very important one, to many people, is address the cost of living crisis. The fifth one he signed was about addressing the cost of living crisis, and as you all know, this is in relation to inflation. Inflation is a big thing on everyone's mind. It's basically the biggest issue on every voter's mind in America. Basically, addressing the inflation crisis, because the inflation in America, as it currently stands, well, it has gone bitter. I mean, it has gone better over the months, especially after Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. But still, during Biden's term, he did the inflation of America after post COVID, it increased dramatically, but the wages of the common people did not. So number five is basically addressing the cost of living crisis, making the groceries more affordable to American citizens, such that inflation goes down and people are able to afford their groceries, people are able to afford homes, people are able to afford all the different things that they need to their common necessities, so on and so forth. Number six and number seven. I'm gonna group number six and number seven. They're also about the same, roughly the same thing, and those are withdrawing from the Paris Climate Treaty, as well as a letter explaining to the UN why they are withdrawing from the Paris Climate Treaty. And if you guys are a bit unaware about what the Paris Climate Treaty, it comes from the Paris Agreement, which was signed at the Paris Accords in blah 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 number of year. It will enter force in 2016. And the whole thing about the Paris Agreement, or basically what was the agreement, was to try and limit uh, emissions of CO2, emissions of carbon dioxide, emissions of carbon, of basically all of the greenhouse gases, such that the global average temperature will only increase by well below 2 degrees by the end of the decade. Basically, just trying to reduce the greenhouse gases as emissions, because as you all know, the more greenhouse gases there are in the atmosphere, the more intense, or basically the more there will be global warming, and the more unpredictable our weathers become, the more hot our environment becomes, so on and so forth. So the Paris Agreement was basically designed to curb this climate effect, this global warming effect. And the reason why Trump really wants to pull out the Paris Accords, or the Paris Agreement, is, as you can see, this, where is it? Here, finance. As you can see, the Paris Agreement reaffirms that the developed countries, basically countries like America, countries like Europe, all of the first world countries, should take the lead in providing financial assistance to countries that are less endowed and more vulnerable, while also encouraging the voluntary contributions by other parties. Basically, what is this saying? This is saying countries like America, countries like Europe, countries like the first world, like China, should realistically be sending financial aid to poorer countries, so that they are also to able to curb their global warming emissions by basically going greener, using green energy, switching to cleaner energy fuels. And Trump doesn't like this, or a lot of Republicans don't like this, because they argue that, well, it's basically the richer nations like America sending nations to poorer countries without getting any benefit. And it doesn't help that America's rival, which is China, isn't really doing this. China isn't really paying much money to the poorer nations. So Trump's basically like, well, if China's not going to do it, if Europe's not going to do it, then why should America bear the brunt of the entire cost? To pay all these poor nations to curb climate change. That's why 6 and 7 are basically his 6 and 7 executive orders signed are basically to ensure that America is not sending money unnecessarily to other countries when basically other countries are not willing to send or basically do the same for America and basically just pull out the climate accords. The eighth order signed was the restoration of free speech and the limiting of government censorship. And this comes after Biden was allegedly trying to ban TikTok. If you all remember, America Trump was trying to, no, not Trump, but Biden was trying to ban TikTok. He was saying that TikTok is basically used by the Chinese to on spy on American citizens and stuff like that, and therefore Biden was trying to censor or basically outright ban the use of TikTok just nationwide. And number 8 is basically restoration of free speech, basically giving people the right to choose whether they want to have TikTok downloaded and want to watch TikTok or not. And also the limiting of government censorship. Trump is trying to promote much more transparency, much more basically trying to be more transparent with the common man, with the common people, trying to be more transparent and trying to limit the censorship and between the governments and the people. And he's basically just trying to win back a lot of the people's trust in the government. That's something that is very low currently, as we see all these scandals and we see all these basically a lot of unhappiness against the government. So he's trying to promote transparency. And the last order that he did sign, uh, and this one is a very important one, is the end of the weaponization of the Supreme Court against political opponents and adversaries. And what is this referring to? This is referring to uh, if you don't know, Trump was basically indicted by the U.S. Supreme Court on 34 counts. 34 counts from allegations from plotting to overturn the last election. If you all know, January 6th is a very heated topic among liberals and conservatives, whether January 6th was a breach of democracy or was trying to steal power in a very unconstitutional way, as well as see, there's cases totaling up to 91 felony counts, and a lot of these were also due to the hush money. Uh, where is it? Yeah, election interference. This was January 6th, and also the hush money scheme, where Trump was faced with a bunch of charges on hush money payments to whatever that is. You can read about all these different. You can read about the different counts that Trump was basically indicted on, as well as Georgia. But basically, the ninth order to end the weaponization of Supreme Court against political opponents and adversaries. This is basically Trump justifying his position that no, he didn't do any of these things wrong. And in fact, what's happening is that the Supreme Court is exercising its power to try and lock Donald Trump in jail just because Donald Trump was the opponent. As y'all know, Biden was part of the Democratic Party, and a lot of the Supreme Court would follow Biden, whereas Trump was at the Republican Party. So basically, he's arguing that the Supreme Court used their powers in a very unconstitutional way and a very unfair way to try and lock Trump in prison so that he cannot run for president in 2024, and basically saying this is weaponization, and therefore he's trying to limit the powers that the Supreme Court can have, and basically arguing that Trump can no longer be indicted on any of these cases, uh, and he has basically presidential immunity. And that was the last policy that he mentioned before they went back to the Oval Office. As you can see, they went back to the and signed a lot more executive orders. Um, so I'm planning to do another video. You'll likely be seeing another video in a few, maybe tomorrow or maybe a few days. I'll be uploading a video on explaining all the executive orders that he does in the 1 hour that he actually talked to reporters too, and he actually says a bunch of cool stuff, like how he decorated the White House in a bit, and also finding the letter. Right, he found Joe Biden's letter to Donald Trump and stuff like that. We can discuss in a future episode, but not right now. I want to just give a brief, just like a very brief overview, and basically just conclude everything I've said. So uh, how does this affect you as like a common citizen? Well, the first thing that Trump basically did, the recession of a lot of Biden's orders, you'll be seeing. This means that a bunch of things from maybe from areas of sexuality, from areas of race and stuff, and a lot of issues concerning climate change, you'll see Trump now have a different stance, and Trump will bring America to a different direction in terms of many of these things like sexuality, race, and climate problems, and all these stuff like that. You'll see the country headed towards a drastically different direction as a lot of Biden's executive orders are removed. You also see Trump will try to lead the direction, lead the American nation into a basically less of an inflation. He's trying to reduce. You'll see Trump try and reduce inflation over the next couple of days, as per the fifth order he signed, and as for the sixth order, you'll likely see. Yeah, basically, Trump is going to try and uh, reverse all of the efforts made by the Biden administration in things like trying to secure green energy or trying to diversify the energy. And you'll likely see during Trump's presidency, you'll see him take steps to maybe increase oil drilling, increase fracking. You'll see him increase. He's talked a lot about nuclear energy. He'll try, and you'll see him talk more about making new nuclear plants and basically more oil drilling sites. And the last one, and one of the more important ones, ending the weaponization of Supreme Court. You'll likely see that Trump or whatever whatever successor he does choose in the future, they will have much more immunity against. Well, basically, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will likely have much less power, as the president now holds somewhat more power, and you'll basically see that all cases, all charges against Trump, basically saying that he's a criminal, will just be voided. Like all these 34 cases against Trump calling him a criminal will no longer have any effect, and basically, Trump will be pardoned in a way from all of these cases. So these are a lot of the executive orders that he has signed. I'll be going. I'll be going through soon all of these other executive orders. But for now, uh, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you later, guys. Bye.